Hello, everyone. As mentioned, I am Matisse Hamill-Nealis. Aside from being the VP of Communications at AbleDocs and somebody who teaches in PR and communications, the whole reason that accessibility is so important to me is because of a mishap I had when I started my career in communications. It was my second day at CNIB, now known as the CNIB Foundation, and I was given the responsibility to tweet. Amazing. When you're entering the workforce and they say, hey, we're going to give you access to our national Twitter account, you get excited. So, being new, and I thought, okay, hey, there's this great article that had some tips. I thought I'd put out a tweet using the acronym DYK for Did You Know? Because on Twitter, again, we have limited characters. I put it out. I feel fantastic. Great, I'm doing a good job. Not even 5 minutes later, I get a phone call from one of my colleagues who is blind. Bless his soul, says, hey, you must be new. I'm Jason. I hope you're having a wonderful day. How are things going? And I was like, great, things are fabulous. Why do you ask? Well, did you just tweet something? Yeah, I did. Thank you so much for asking. Was it okay? Did I miss something? To which he informed me, well, stay calm, but did you know that DYK is not read as DYK, or did you know by a screen reader? It's like, no, what do you mean? What is it read as? He's like, well, I hope you're sitting down because you just tweeted dick to everybody. Well then, first and foremost, my initial thought was, that's it, I'm getting fired, pack up my stuff, I'm out of here. After I calmed down and gave myself that 30-second pity party, I decided if I didn't know that, and I'm a communicator, what else don't I know? And what else don't other communicators know? That is why I've created this presentation on accessibility and communications. This is a bit cut down from what I usually present because we are a limited time, and also because I am between you and lunch. So let's get you lunch. So let's just dive right on into it. As communicators and marketers, we tend to forget about accessibility. We usually are thinking of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but accessibility tends to be an afterthought. So when I give these talks to rooms of communicators and marketers, I say it's time for us to get the bright idea, i.e., inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. We can't have the other three, inclusion, diversity, and equity, without accessibility. And it's a concept a lot of them don't realize. So I try to break it down with a few tips and tricks on how they can start creating accessible content. Hopefully some of this is new to you, and if not, it's a nice little refresher. So when creating content, we need to think about writing in plain language. In a lot of cases, communicators like to be very verbose or use big words when you don't really need to. So what I tell my communicating community is that you want to try to write at a grade 8 level or lower in accordance with WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Use simple words, short sentences, and write in active words. When you're creating content, from a visual standpoint, avoid italics and underlining. A lot of people tend to ask, well, why is that? It emphasizes the point. Yes, it may emphasize the point for those who are sighted, but those who may have sight loss or have cognitive disabilities, it can cause some extra issues in them trying to understand the message. So try to avoid them. Avoid capitalizing all full words, phrases, and sentences. A shout out to my husband who is currently watching this live. Not only does it help people with disabilities better understand what's being written, but it helps everybody. He put out a magazine, and in all caps, it said Android. The magazine went out to, I believe it was 400,000 people. Android was spelt wrong. Nobody caught it after multiple checks. The reason being is that our brain looks at words like what I like to say, the motion of the ocean. So in that, I mean, is if it's a large P, a capital P, it's taller, and then you have your lowercase letters, which are lower. Maybe they dip down like a G or a Q. And our brain sees the shapes, reads the shapes first before actually reading the word. When it's all caps and it all looks the same, our brain doesn't catch on to it. So spelling Android wrong can come across. The next is avoid low color contrast. Again, this helps everybody. Having black text on a bright red background can be very draining on your eyes and also makes it difficult to read. So following color contrast processes is the best way to go about this. There's some great tools out there that are free for color contrast checkers that you can find online by a simple Google search. And finally, when creating content, if you're posting it online especially, make sure it's accessible. If you're posting PDFs, make sure they are PDF UA compliant. If you're sharing Word documents, make sure they are accessible. You're using your styles pane to create your headings, creating proper tables of contents, and actually making proper tables when need be. And of course, adding alt text. Speaking of alt text, alternative text or alt text, image descriptions, and captions. I find in communications and marketing, people get a little confused about these. What's the difference? Why do I need them? Are they even important? Yes, they are important, first and foremost. Let's just get that clear. But what is the difference? So alternative text or alt text is a brief textual explanation of an image, used typically in coding or embedding in an image or digital graphics that are online or in digital files. Alt text is not visible on websites unless you hover over it or if the image does not appear. An image description, on the other hand, is a more detailed explanation of an image that provides textual access to visual content. This can be used as alt text if you're provided the amount of space to write such a large description, or can be put in addition to the alt text as part of the document or the website as a description of what the image is. And finally, an image caption. It's a brief explanation that provides further information about the image. These do not need to focus on the visual components and can be supplemental to an image. Note that a caption and an image description are complementary to one another, and a caption typically doesn't describe the image. It's just additional information. When it comes to image descriptions, they should accompany all images in every format: print, digital files, presentations, websites, and they can also be delivered audibly, as you're going to see next. On my screen, there is a photo of me that I had taken for my 35th birthday this past October, and I'm going to compare the alternative text versus the image description. So if I was writing alt text for this image, the alt text would be, Matisse smiles while standing in a field holding balloons. Very basic, quick, to the point. The image description, being provided a bit more information, is Matisse is smiling while standing in the middle of a field holding white, black, and pink balloons. She has pink hair and is wearing a black knee-length dress and brown boots. So I'm providing more context with my image description. So when it comes to alt text and image descriptions, and we're thinking about social media, see the segue here? When we're talking about image descriptions and social media, we have to consider that there are limitations to when we can put a larger image description versus simple alt text. For example, on Twitter, you have significantly more characters to write your alt text in comparison to, let's say, LinkedIn, where you only have 300. So you have to take into consideration these limitations and understand how much information can you get out there. But speaking about social media, on my screen there is an image of a smartphone that has a bunch of social media apps showing. First and foremost, and I'm sure this is just a quick reminder for everybody, make sure you use CamelCase for your hashtags. The example I have here is the hashtag something like this, where each letter is capitalized for the first letter. So each word is capitalized for the first letter. So something has a capital S, like has a capital L, and this has a capital T. In communications and marketing, if you think a few years back, this concept would have been very, very helpful for the PR team for Susan Boyle when she released her album. I see a few smirks in the room who understand what I'm talking about, but let me inform everybody. Susan Boyle released an album, and the hashtag was Susan Album Party. Not in CamelCase. It went viral for all the wrong reasons, as it read, Sue's Anal Bum Party. CamelCase is your friend. And now marketers should also take that into consideration. Again, avoid acronyms like DYK and the one for in case you missed it, ICYMI. I've heard this on different screen readers. My favorite is ISIMI, which if you're listening to that, you don't know what that means. And I apologize to our ASL interpreter for ISIMI and how you will describe it. Avoid abbreviations. That's something a lot of people don't consider. When it comes to abbreviations, at the end of the day, it's all dependent on the end user and their language setting on their assistive technology. By that, I mean, if you are tweeting capital G, lowercase OV period, British English will read it as government versus American English will read it as governor. So you might have a misinterpretation or lose your message across to your audience. Of course, provide alternative text to all your images and GIFs or GIFs, depending on what school of thought you are in that pronunciation. We're not here to fight that. But wherever applicable, make sure you do add in that alt text. And of course, add in that alternative text or image description in the main post copy as well. Why do we do this? The reason being is that people typically think, and I say in the communications and marketing world, typically think, well, it's embedded, everybody with sight loss can access it. That's not true. If somebody has low vision, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are using any text-to-speech software like JAWS, NVDA, or VoiceOver. They might be using magnification software instead. So they may have your image zoomed in up to 12, 14, 16 times magnification and not really get a sense of what the image is. By providing that same image description or alt text in your main post, you are providing them the same information as somebody who is using a screen reader to navigate what that image is all about. So still providing them their independence without having to switch over to use a screen reader. On social media, we see videos all the time getting posted. How do we make our videos accessible? When it comes to videos, we need to ensure that they are described, either post-production described or integrated described, or audio descriptions, in other words. Post-production described video or audio descriptions are created when you have done your video and then there's a secondary audio layer, that is applied to your video. So you're watching a show, you're watching a video, and then suddenly you hear, man walks into room. Providing additional context as to the setting, people in the room, what's happening to give a better contextual understanding of what's happening. Integrated described video, on the other hand, or integrated audio descriptions, are when these key notes and key parts of the description of what's happening are already embedded within the actual script. So you don't need that secondary audio layer. Instead, how this works is that from pre-production, production, through to post-production, accessibility is always top of mind. You're always checking in to make sure, does the script describe what it is that's happening in a nice, fluid way? So it's not just going to be very abrupt and say, hey, Jennison just walked into the room. Hey, Jennison. Instead, it would just simply say, hey, Jennison. Thank you for being my example, Jennison. The second part of making your video accessible is to ensure that they are captioned, open or closed captions. For those of you who are unaware, open captions are embedded into your video and cannot be turned on or off, versus closed captions provide the end user the opportunity and chance to turn them on or off at their discretion. If you are using YouTube, I highly, highly recommend that you do use closed captions, as YouTube provides additional opportunities to customize the experience to the end user. When captions are closed captions on YouTube, the end user can change the style, the font, the color, the size, as well as the location of the captions on the screen. In some cases, some platforms don't allow, social media platforms don't allow you to add a separate file. When it's closed caption videos, they are two files. There's the video file and typically an SRT or VTT file attached. In cases where you can't upload that, for example, Instagram right now, you would add add an open caption file. But if you're on LinkedIn, you would have the opportunity to add that closed caption or SRT VTT file with it. So always make sure that you're aware of which one you want to use. And always provide transcripts as part of your video's descriptions. Not only will this help be more accessible, but also it allows you to boost your SEO. And when it comes to captions, if you are just using auto captions, make sure you're editing them. Because the worst thing that could happen is that either A, it somehow spells out a profanity because it thinks it heard that, or it spells your brand or company's name wrong, which doesn't look great. And finally, it doesn't help your SEO. So that is a brief introduction on accessibility in communications. Like I said, I don't want to keep you away from lunch. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them now.